Greetings, YouTube. We're going old school today. I don't feel like having a bright light shine on my face. So I found myself thinking about world building, and in specific, when the world is filled with sapient animals. Now, all animals are sentient. They are aware of their surroundings. My cats are aware of their surroundings. In fact, Mandarin's right there. I'm probably going to hop up in a minute. As soon as I start talking at the camera, she figures it must be time for her to be on camera, too. Um, But they're not sapient like us. They are aware. They are not self-aware. They're not aware that they are aware. We are, at least most of us. Um, and if you have a world entirely populated with sapient animals, you've got a problem because some of those animals, admittedly the minority, are carnivores, and they are only going to be able to survive by consuming other animals. The equivalent of a bunch of humans that must kill other humans to live. Zombies, cannibals, what have you. Sorry, I'm tired. Makes my face itch. Um, and that's an issue. And I've very rarely ever seen it handled well. You see it in, like, The Lion King. They talk about, well, we eat the antelopes, and eventually we lions, we die, and we go to the earth, and then we become the grass, and then the antelopes eat the grass. Cycle of life kind of thing, which is great. But you see, antelopes eating grass and then they're sapient, are sapient animals eating vegetables, which are not sapient. Whereas the lions in this setting are murdering people to live. That's a problem. You see it in Jungle Book. I just watched the live action Disney version. I had not seen it yet. The one with Christopher Walken playing um, uh, the giant orangutan, and I quite enjoyed that. But again, you still have that same problem. Even the best of the characters, the most reasonable, the most pleasant people, the Black Panther that is essentially the mentor to Mowgli, is gonna have to kill other sapient beings to live. I've seen it avoided, for example, in Zootopia. Only the mammals are sapient. So all mammals are sapient and humanoid. Some settings, like Jungle Book and Narnia and things like that, they have sapient animals that are just regular animals like this one right here, but they are fully sapient and they can talk. Like Aslan. Aslan's a lion, or a very big lion, that can talk, and he isn't intelligent, but he looks like a lion. But in Zootopia, they avoid it by only having mammals. So that means that they can consume birds and lizards and fish. Everybody's good. So they're able to eat non-sapient animals, and so the only issue within the storyline is that they remember a past when the carnivorous sapient animals would consume the intelligent herbivores. Probably other carnivores are aware as well. There are carnivores that will kill other carnivores for food. Now, I talked about this a long time ago in a setting which was supposed to be like the anthro version of America, and I thought, well, the world building was silly because you wouldn't have America with anthros, and they completely essentially ignored the problem. And I talked about the fact that it would essentially mean it's the same as you coming outside and finding your neighbor has been slaughtered and butchered on the ground. You're going to call the police, except no one's going to come. No one's going to care, because in this world, it's okay if your carnivorous neighbor kills your other neighbor. Nobody bats an eye. And that's twisted. So how do you deal with that? Some settings, like Narnia, have both sapient and non-sapient animals. And they all look like animals, so I'm not sure how you tell them apart. You know what I mean? I mean, it's awesome that this deer over here is sapient and can talk to you, but how do you tell that at 60 feet if you're hunting and you're making sure that the deer doesn't know you're there? So you put an arrow through its lungs and or heart, and then find out as you come up to get your kill, it looks at you and goes, "Why?" You've just murdered someone. So that's bad. And what do? Do you just butcher them anyway and eat them and hope nobody notices that the what's left of that deer was sapient, hoping they'll never have been able to figure that out? I don't know. How do you get around that? I can remember a very kind of mythical book I read a long time ago. It was fantasy, and it had a very fairy tale vibe to it, and all the animals, all the land animals, were sapient and humanoid, or at least partially humanoid. And they got around the problem by all the carnivores eating fish, because the fish were not sapient. So I guess animals in the water and the seas were not. I'm assuming that the whales were, the sea mammals, things like that. But how do you get that supply line? I mean, it's awesome if you're near a river or an ocean. And admittedly, there's going to be far fewer people consuming fish because there's far fewer carnivores compared to the herbivore population. Far fewer people will be consuming as opposed to like humans, where all humans are omnivores. So all of us can eat fish if we want to. But what about the people that live in the mountains or the deserts? Because they're going to be there. You have just these huge supply lines moving fish from place to place, and the people at the coast are going to have a real stranglehold on the folks that live far away from the oceans and rivers and lakes, because without them, they're going to have to murder people to live, and that's problematic. The story was pretty good. The main character was a bobcat, if I remember correctly, and he eventually hunts down Death to try to stop him from killing his community because of a plague. And Death, which is in the book, is a giant cat, essentially, like a giant panther or something like that. I think it's a panther, and it basically says that he wants the bobcat's death. And so the bobcat makes the decision, okay, I will give up my life to save my community. And he goes, okay, I agree, go ahead and kill me. And the Death is like, I'm not going to kill you. I don't want your life. I want your death. He says, so when it's time, I'll come for you. And so he goes home. And it was also cool that catnip was the equivalent of weed. And he loved, he was just a dope head, a pop head, just like doing nothing except getting high and chasing his girlfriend, kind of thing. It was quite entertaining. I have no memory of the author's name or the title of the book, but I quite enjoyed it. But besides that, that's a little aside there. What do you do in a world where all the animals are sapient? Whether they're like this one or they're humanoid to some degree. Utopia, again, it's only mammals. The story I just mentioned, fish are allowed, but that means that fish become a great commodity. And people that control the fish control the literal life of, great, yay for cat hair, the life of the people far from rivers and oceans and lakes and things like that. I think it's an interesting question, and I think that if you're going to have this in your setting, you really need to address it. And when it comes to world building, I think it's a failure when they don't address it. But it's not addressed seriously in Lion King or Jungle Book or any of the other settings, or Narnia. How do you figure this out? Who is who in Narnia? Who can be eaten and who can't be eaten? And in Lion King and in Jungle Book, you have to murder your neighbors to live. That's twisted. And these are kid stories, remember. So yeah, that's some really heavy stuff. And I'm sure that there are some kids that figured it out and were disturbed by it. I know I would be disturbed by it as a child if I suddenly realized that the story is telling me that neighbors are murdering neighbors for food. That places the entire world firmly in the zombie category. So let's talk about world building and how you get around that whole sapient animals having kill other sapient animals to live. Because I think that leaves a major hole in a lot of world building, a lot of world settings, and we should think about it. We should think deeply about it. And far too many authors of settings don't. They hand wave it away. And not only is that lazy, but I think that's a missed opportunity to get deeper and more complex and interesting storylines if you find a solution, or you don't find a solution and you deal with the ramifications. That gets really dark really fast, but I think it's interesting. So let's talk about sapient animals and how do the carnivores eat.